The day started like any other for Claire Reynolds, the marketing associate who had made a quiet habit of arriving before everyone else. The office lights were still warming up, the smell of fresh coffee filling the air as she unlocked her computer and sighed softly. For months, her days had followed the same pattern. Early mornings, late nights, and that hollow quiet in between where she pretended everything was fine. Her friends said she was dedicated. In truth, she was just trying to keep herself from thinking too much. Across the hall, her boss, Ethan Parker, was already in his office. He wasn't much older than her, maybe late 30s, but he carried himself with a calm, confident energy that made people trust him. He didn't shout, didn't micromanage, didn't play favorites. Everyone liked him, but no one really knew him. That was just Ethan, professional, composed, distant in a way that made him seem untouchable. Claire admired that about him. Maybe a little too much. When she had joined Everline Marketing 3 years ago, she had been nervous, unsure if she could handle the fast pace. But Ethan had noticed her effort early on and given her small chances to prove herself. With each project, she'd grown more confident. Over time, though, something else had changed. She'd begun to care a little too much about what he thought. She told herself it was just respect. But sometimes, when she caught him smiling at something she'd said, her heart betrayed her. That morning, Ethan walked out of his office holding a cup of coffee. His expression was unreadable as usual. But when his eyes met hers, he didn't just nod politely. He hesitated for a moment, almost as if debating something. Then, in that calm voice everyone in the office knew well, he said, "Claire, could you step into my office when you have a moment?" Her stomach tightened slightly. She nodded, smiling as if it was nothing. But as she gathered her notepad and pen, she couldn't stop wondering why he'd called her in. Had she made a mistake in the Larkin report? Was something wrong with the new client pitch? Or was it just routine feedback? When she stepped into his office, Ethan looked up from his desk and stood. His shirt sleeves were rolled up and his jacket hung neatly on the coat rack. The morning light filtered through the blinds, striping his desk with gold. He gave a small, polite smile and gestured toward the chair. "Close the door, please." She hesitated, not because it was unusual, but because the way he said it felt different. Still, she did as asked and took a seat. The door clicked softly behind her, and the sound felt louder than it should have. "Claire," he began, his tone measured, "I wanted to talk to you about your recent work. I've been going through the client feedback." Her shoulders stiffened a little. "Oh, I hope there weren't any issues." He shook his head. "No issues. Quite the opposite, actually. The clients were impressed. They specifically mentioned how detailed your presentations were." She relaxed, a small smile forming. "That's good to hear." He smiled faintly back. "You've been doing great work, Claire. But I've also noticed you've been staying late almost every night this month." Her smile faltered. "Just trying to keep up with deadlines," she said softly. "I know," he said, folding his arms, "but you don't need to do it all alone. You've been pushing yourself harder than anyone else in this department." There was something in his tone, concern, not criticism, that caught her off guard. "It's fine, really," she said quickly. I like to finish what I start." Ethan watched her for a moment, then said quietly, "That's what I used to tell myself." Claire blinked, unsure how to respond. Ethan wasn't the kind of person who talked about himself. "What do you mean?" He leaned back slightly, looking out the window for a moment before answering. "A few years ago, I went through a rough patch. My marriage was falling apart. Work was the only thing that made sense. So I stayed late, just like you." It felt easier than going home to silence. Claire's heart softened. She hadn't known he was divorced. He never talked about personal things. "I didn't know," she said quietly. He gave a small shrug. "Not many people do. But when I see you doing the same thing, I can't help but worry." There was a long pause. The office outside buzzed faintly, but inside his room, it's quiet, just the two of them, and the steady ticking of the clock on the wall. She looked down, fiddling with her pen. "I guess it's been easier to stay busy," she admitted finally. "My boyfriend and we broke up earlier this year. So, yeah, I guess I've been hiding behind work too." Ethan nodded slowly, as if he understood completely. "That makes sense," he smiled faintly, but there was sadness in it too. It's strange. People always think the ones who work the hardest are the most disciplined, but sometimes they're just the ones trying not to fall apart. That struck something deep inside her. For a moment, she didn't feel like an employee talking to her boss. She felt like a person being seen. Ethan stood up and walked around his desk, resting against the edge. He crossed his arms again, his tone softer now. "I hope you don't mind me saying that. I just think sometimes we need to take care of ourselves before we burn out completely." She met his gaze. "I don't mind," she said. "Actually, thank you. No one's really said that to me lately." He nodded, then smiled a little. "Then I'm glad I did." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that felt meaningful, like to people who didn't need to fill the air with words. Claire felt her heart beating faster than it should, though she couldn't say why. Maybe it was just the kindness in his tone. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, steady, calm, almost reassuring. After a moment, Ethan pushed off the desk. "There's one more thing," he said, sounding more like his usual self again. "There's a company retreat next month. I want you to be on the planning committee." "Me?" she asked, surprised. Double quotes, "Yes. You've got a good sense of what makes people feel connected. I think you do a great job." She smiled genuinely this time. "Thank you. I'd love to." "Good," he said, nodding. "We'll talk more about it later this week." Claire stood, and for a brief second their eyes met again. She wasn't sure what to say. Something about this conversation had shifted the air between them subtly, quietly. But definitely, as she reached for the door handle, Ethan spoke once more, his voice low. "Claire, for what it's worth, you're doing great, even if you don't always feel like it." Her breath caught slightly, but she managed a small smile. "Thank you," she said. "That means more than you know." Then she stepped out, the door closing gently behind her. The office noise seemed louder now, as if reminding her she was back in the real world. But inside, she felt something different, a quiet warmth, strange lightness she hadn't felt in months. It wasn't about romance, not yet. It was about connection, the rare kind that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. For the rest of the day, she worked with a small smile on her face, though she couldn't quite explain why. That night, as she packed up her things, she glanced toward Ethan's office. The lights were off. He'd already gone home. Still, she could almost hear his voice in her mind, calm, gentle, understanding. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel so alone. What she didn't know yet was that this conversation, the one that began with a closed door, would open a chapter of her life she never saw coming. Something that would test her heart, her choices, and the invisible line between comfort and connection. And the next morning, when Ethan stopped by her desk with an easy smile and said, "Good morning, Claire," something inside her shifted again. The following week at Everline Marketing felt different, though Claire couldn't explain why. Every morning now began with the same simple moment, Ethan passing by her desk, offering a small smile or a soft good morning. It was nothing unusual on the surface, just a polite gesture between a boss and an employee. But to Claire, it carried a quiet weight. Each time she felt something stir inside her, a warmth she didn't want to name. And yet couldn't ignore Ethan. For his part seemed unchanged, calm, professional, focused. But there were subtle signs if you looked closely enough. The way his gaze lingered when she spoke in meetings. Or how he always found a reason to check in about projects she handled alone. He wasn't crossing any lines, not really. But something unspoken had started to live in the space between them. One afternoon, while the team prepared for the upcoming company retreat, Ethan stopped by Claire's desk. "How's the planning coming along?" "Almost done," she said, looking up from her laptop. "I'm just finalizing the activity schedule." He smiled. "You really took charge of this. I'm impressed." She laughed lightly. "You told me to make people feel connected. I'm trying. That you are," he said softly, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Then he added, "Could you come by my office later? We need to finalize the budget before I send it upstairs. Course, she replied. By late afternoon, most of the team had left for the day. The office lights dimmed automatically as the sun dipped below the skyline. Claire knocked lightly on Ethan's door. "Come in," he said, looking up from his laptop. She stepped inside. And again, that familiar request came. "Close the door, please." Something about the words brought her back to that first conversation, the one that had changed everything. She hesitated for a second before doing as asked. Ethan gestured to the chair across from him. "Let's go over these numbers quickly," he said. They spent 15 minutes reviewing documents, exchanging short comments and suggestions. Everything about it was routine, ordinary. Yet the air felt heavier than it should. When the conversation finally slowed, neither of them spoke for a moment. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. "You've done a great job," Ethan said finally. "I can tell you put a lot of heart into this." "Thank you," she said quietly. "It's been nice to feel useful again." He looked at her, frowning slightly. "You've always been useful, Claire. You don't have to prove that to anyone." His tone was soft but firm, and it made her chest tighten. "I guess I just needed to hear that," she admitted. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her for a long moment. "You remind me of myself when I first started managing a team," he said. "I thought I had to do everything perfectly. That if I didn't, people would stop trusting me. It took me years to realize people don't remember the mistakes. They remember how you made them feel." She smiled faintly. "You're a good boss, Ethan." He gave a quiet laugh. "I try." Then his voice softened. "But I don't always get it right. Sometimes I keep too much distance." "Why?" she asked gently. He hesitated. "Because it's easier," he said finally. "When you let people get too close, it complicates things. And in this job, that can be dangerous." She nodded slowly, understanding what he meant, or at least what she thought he meant. Still, she couldn't stop herself from saying, "But sometimes distance hurts more than it protects." Ethan's gaze lifted to hers, and for a moment, neither of them looked away. The air between them shifted again, not with tension, but with something softer, heavier. They weren't two coworkers discussing work anymore. They were two lonely people standing on the edge of something they didn't quite understand. The silence stretched. And finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low. "Claire, you're right." Then he looked down at the papers on his desk, as if realizing how close that moment had come to crossing a line. "Anyway," he said briskly, his tone shifting back to business, "these numbers look good. You can go ahead and submit them." Claire nodded, standing slowly. She felt her pulse race, though she didn't know why. "Okay, I'll do that." As she turned to leave, Ethan said quietly, "And Claire." She paused at the door. "I meant what I said. You don't have to prove yourself. You already have." She smiled a small, grateful smile before stepping out. But as she walked back to her desk, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed again. The next day, during a team meeting, Ethan seemed as composed as ever. But when Claire spoke about the retreat, he watched her with quiet pride. Everyone noticed her leadership, her attention to detail, her calm confidence. It was clear she'd grown, and he seemed genuinely proud of that. After the meeting, one of her coworkers, Jenna, nudged her playfully. "You and Ethan make a great team. You should co-manage the next event." Claire laughed it off, though her cheeks warmed. "We just work well together. That's all." Jenna smirked. "Sure, just work." The joke was innocent, but it lingered in Claire's mind longer than she wanted. That night, as she got ready for bed, she caught herself thinking about Ethan, about the quiet strength in his voice. The way he always seemed to see more than she said. She told herself it was just admiration. He was her boss, nothing more. Still, her thoughts refused to listen. When the day of the retreat finally arrived, whole team gathered at a lakeside resort 2 hours outside the city. It was meant to be a weekend of team building and rest. No stress, no deadlines. Claire had worked tirelessly to make everything perfect. The first day went smoothly. Games, laughter, and long conversations filled the air. Everyone relaxed, even Ethan, who rarely joined group activities. That evening after dinner, the team gathered by a bonfire near the lake. The night was cool, the air scented with pine and smoke. Someone played soft music on a portable speaker. Claire sat a few seats away from Ethan, but she could feel his presence, calm, quiet, reassuring. When most of the group drifted off to their cabins, only a few people remained. Claire stood to leave, but Ethan caught her eye. "Stay a bit," he said. "It's nice out here." She hesitated, then nodded. They sat together near the fire, the crackle filling the silence. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Ethan said softly, "You did a great job with this retreat." Everyone's relaxed. That's not easy to pull off. "Thank you," she said. "I just wanted people to feel connected again." "It's been a tough year." He nodded. "You've got a gift for that. You make people feel comfortable." She smiled faintly. "Even you." He chuckled quietly. "Especially me." That answer made her heart skip. The warmth of the fire glowed against his face, softening the lines she'd never noticed before. He looked more human, less like the composed leader she saw at work every day. "I don't usually talk about personal things," he said after a while. "But lately, I find it easier when you're around." Her breath caught slightly. "Why me?" He looked at her then, really looked. "Because you listen," he said, "and because you see things other people miss." For a moment, the world around them felt quiet, just the fire, the stars, and the slow beat of their hearts. Neither of them moved, yet everything felt closer. Then Ethan broke the silence with a gentle sigh. "We should probably get some rest." "Big day tomorrow." "Yeah," Claire said softly. "Good night, Ethan." He smiled. "Good night, Claire." As she walked back to her cabin, she felt her heart racing again. Not from what had been said, but from what hadn't. Something was happening between them, slow and unspoken. Something neither of them could name without breaking the fragile balance they'd built. That night, lying in bed, Claire stared at the ceiling and wondered if Ethan felt it too. That quiet pull that made ordinary moments feel like something more. By the lake, Ethan sat alone by the dying fire, lost in thought. He knew the line between them was clear, and yet he also knew that something had already crossed it. Something as simple and complicated as emotion. And though neither said it aloud, both of them sensed it. Their story wasn't just about work anymore. It was about what happens when two careful hearts find comfort where they shouldn't and wonder what it might mean. They stopped pretending. The Monday after the retreat arrived faster than anyone wanted. The office buzzed with new energy, people chatting about bonfire stories, team games, and late-night laughter. For Claire, though, the return felt heavier. She sat at her desk pretending to focus on emails. But her thoughts were still at the lake, on the sound of Ethan's voice by the fire. His calm eyes reflecting the flames. His words that had felt so personal. Ethan walked past her desk mid-morning. "Morning, Claire," he said, his tone steady. "Morning," she replied, forcing a polite smile. It was ordinary, professional, the same greeting as always. Yet both of them knew something had shifted. They'd crossed an invisible emotional line that weekend, and now they were standing on opposite sides, trying to act as if nothing had happened. The day passed in meetings and reports, but Claire couldn't shake the feeling that she was carrying something unspoken. Around lunchtime, she stepped out for air, standing near the office windows overlooking the city. She was deep in thought when she heard Ethan's voice behind her. "Taking a break?" he asked. She turned. "Yeah, just needed a minute." He stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "I know the feeling," he said softly. For a few seconds, they simply watched the skyline, the tall glass towers, the busy streets far below. About the retreat, Ethan said finally, "You really made it special. I don't think the team's been that close in years." "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'm glad it worked out." Ethan hesitated. "I wanted to say something else, too." That night by the fire, "I hope I didn't make things uncomfortable." She turned to look at him, surprised. "You didn't," she said quickly. "It was just honest. I appreciated it." He nodded slowly, his eyes searching hers. "Good. I just wanted to be sure." The moment lingered again, one of those quiet pauses where emotion filled the air, even when no one spoke. Then Ethan cleared his throat and said, "We should probably get back. The finance team's waiting for me." Claire smiled faintly. Of course. But as he walked away, she felt something sink inside her. The realization that maybe what happened at the retreat was just a fleeting connection. Something beautiful that belonged only to that night. Days turned into weeks, and work returned to its usual rhythm. But the emotional distance between them became more noticeable. Ethan was polite, respectful, but careful. Too careful. Claire tried to focus on her projects, but she missed the easy warmth they'd shared. She knew she shouldn't care this much, but she did. One evening, as she stayed late to finish a presentation, she noticed Ethan's office lights still on. Everyone else had gone home. After some hesitation, she walked to his door and knocked softly. "Come in," he said. She stepped inside holding a few papers. "I wanted to drop these off before I forget." "Thanks," he said, taking them. "You didn't have to stay this late. I wanted to make sure it was perfect for tomorrow," she said with a tired smile. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in weeks, his expression softened. "You've been carrying too much lately," he said gently. "You should take some time off." She shook her head. "Work helps. It keeps my mind busy." Ethan closed the file and leaned back slightly. "You don't always have to be busy to be okay." Claire hesitated, then asked quietly, "Is that what you do?" "Stay busy to avoid thinking." He gave a small, rueful smile. "Maybe it works most days." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The room's silent except for the faint hum of city traffic below. "Claire," he said finally, his tone softer now. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something, and I don't want you to take it the wrong way." Her heart skipped. "Okay," he exhaled slowly. "You've become one of the most reliable people here. You've grown, taken initiative, earned everyone's trust. But," he paused, "I also think we've blurred some lines. That's on me." Her chest tightened. "You mean the retreat?" He nodded slightly. "That and everything before it. I value you, Claire, your work, your kindness, the way you care about people. But I don't want things to get complicated. Not for you, not for me." The words hit harder than she expected. She looked down, trying to steady her voice. "I understand." Ethan's eyes softened. "I didn't mean to make this awkward. You've done nothing wrong. I just need to make sure I'm leading the right way." There it was, the wall. The one she'd felt but hoped wasn't really there. She nodded, managing a small smile. "You don't have to explain. I get it." He gave a quiet sigh. "Claire," but she cut him off gently. "It's fine, Ethan. Really. Thank you for being honest." She turned to leave, holding herself together until she reached the hallway. Only then did she let out a shaky breath. For the next few days, she threw herself into work harder than ever. She arrived early, left late, focused on results. She told herself she didn't care, that professionalism mattered more than feelings. But every time she passed Ethan's office and saw his light on, something inside her stirred, a mix of longing and loss. Then, one Friday evening, something unexpected happened. The company won a major client, the biggest account they'd ever landed. Cheers filled the office, and the team decided to celebrate at a nearby restaurant. Ethan, usually reluctant to join, showed up. He raised his glass in a quiet toast. "To all of you," he said, "and to Claire, who made this deal possible." The group clapped and cheered. Claire smiled, surprised but touched. She caught Ethan's eye across the table, and for a brief second, that old warmth returned. After dinner, as everyone began leaving, Ethan approached her. "Walk with me." She hesitated, then nodded. They stepped out into the cool evening air, the city lights glittering around them. "I've been thinking about what I said the other night," he began. "About keeping distance." Claire stayed quiet. "I said it because it felt safe," he continued. "But the truth is, it's been the hardest thing I've done." She looked at him, surprised. "Why?" Because distance doesn't always protect people, he said softly. Sometimes it just makes you realize what you're losing. They stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, the world moving around them, cars passing, lights flashing, voices fading. Ethan, she began, unsure what to say. He met her gaze. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know that what I feel, what's been between us, isn't just in your head. The honesty in his tone caught her off guard. Her breath trembled. So, what now? She asked quietly. He smiled faintly, a trace of sadness in his eyes. Now we keep being who we are, good people trying to do the right thing. Maybe someday life will make more sense than it does right now. She nodded slowly, blinking back the emotion rising in her chest. I think that's enough for me to hear. They stood there for another moment, saying nothing. It wasn't a grand confession or a promise of forever, just two people acknowledging what existed between them without breaking what they'd built. When they finally parted ways, Claire felt something unexpected: peace. For the first time, she wasn't confused about her feelings. She understood that sometimes connection didn't need a name. It just needed honesty. Weeks later, their working relationship settled into something steady again. Respectful, calm, unspokenly close. Ethan continued to trust her with big projects. Claire led her team with new confidence. And though neither of them mentioned that night again, there was a quiet understanding that remained, one built not on romance, but on mutual respect and unspoken care. One evening, as Claire packed up her things, Ethan stopped by her desk. Heading out? Yeah, she said, smiling. Big day tomorrow. He nodded. You've come a long way, Claire. I'm proud of you. She smiled back. Thank you for everything. As he walked away, she realized something important, that this story wasn't about heartbreak or forbidden feelings. It was about growth and learning when to let go of what could be, to protect what already mattered. When Claire stepped outside into the evening air, the city lights felt warmer somehow. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she knew she was stronger now, and that somewhere behind that closed office door, someone else had grown to dot their story. Wasn't about what happened behind the door that first day. It was about everything that followed: honesty, restraint. Think the quiet kind of love that changes people without needing to be named. And that was enough.